Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your host, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back into the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino, and I'm here with Mr. Mexico, Joe LaVacca. Right. He is internationally. Actually, that makes you our second international guest.
That's just thinking about that.
You can.
And we're celebrating.
Yeah, exactly.
You got balloons already
popping up if you're watching on YouTube. On that note, you can find this podcast on YouTube at cupsofjoe_PT. And you can always reach out to either one of us on Instagram if you have any questions or just want to chat. At Joe Gambino DPT for myself and at Strength in Motion _PT for Mr. Mexico over there. And this podcast is also on Instagram as well, Beyond Pain Podcast over there. Did I get it all, Joe?
That's right. I'm gonna throw out some shuckas because you got it. You got it. This is
there we go.
This is one of the restaurants that we went through. The shuckas the other night. This is high and tight or hang loose? Hang loose.
Hang loose. I like it.
Yeah, we're hanging loose, man. It got down here. If you follow me on social media, sort of like documented my whole surprise adventure for Courtney. Went really well. Needless to say, she was very surprised. I think the shock carried over for about 24 hours. And but now we're here. We're mixing work and relaxation, but I couldn't miss the podcast. Couldn't go off schedule. So just carving out some time to spend with you and our loyal listeners.
Well, I love it. Welcome, from Mexico. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and the listeners. Hopefully there's extra appreciation for this episode. I'm with you enjoying. I mean, you're outside. You look very cozy and warm where I'm sure in New York, you're not quite getting that.
Well, also in New York, funny enough, on Sunday, the dam's supposed to come back. We're finally supposed to get snow. So we'll see how that disrupts my life and my travel. Hopefully not too bad. But yeah, it makes sense that the only time I've traveled internationally, we would have a snowstorm impacting me to come back. So fingers crossed I get back. I got a full week next week, business as usual. But yeah, man, I'm very excited. And from what we said, we might have a flip-flop background over the next couple of weeks if you do a little trip with the fam. But no pressure. I did the pot from Mexico. No pressure on you, my friend.
We'll see. We'll be having two kids running around. Well, one kid running around and one kid just lounging around. So I want to make things a little more difficult if we actually get this trip to work out.
Well, and it also seems like it's a more proper vacation. This was a surprise work trip. So that's why I have a little bit more flexibility. And I would imagine then with two babies, you're supposed to be down there to celebrate and relax. So hopefully we don't see your background in Mexico. But if we do, that'd be cool. And then we could do a little side-by-side sunrise comparison. There we go.
We'll see whose sky looks better on video. Well, I think this officially means you've made it in life, Joe, because you get to now travel to Mexico, work there, play there, have some fun. And you don't have to take any time off, do anything like that. You're just living life.
That's it, man. I mean, there were a few things that emerged from the pandemic, right? This being one of them. Work from anywhere, and a couple of virtual people, a couple meetings, a podcast. This is regular Friday. So I'm ready to rock. I'm energized. I'm pumped. So let's get rolling. What are we talking about today?
Well, let's help other people live their best lives. And today we're going to be talking about 3 mistakes that you as a listener are making when you're trying to get out of pain. So I think this would be a fun topic because I think there are very common mistakes that people make, that are themes that we see quite often. So I'll let you roll with number 1 and we'll go from there.
Yeah, number 1 for me. I think maybe we preface this with we're labeling these things as mistakes, but they're so common. So you aren't doing anything wrong. but these are very normal things that you and I hear, and we're going to try to help you manage or reframe what you're going through if you are listening and you're stuck in pain. But number one, a big mistake I see people make or really kind of hang on to is only focusing on the painful signal. So when you ask them how they're doing, a very open-ended, generic question, they'll immediately come to, oh, well, my back, my knee, my foot, label the body part. And oftentimes I'll just hit the timeout button and say, hold on, we'll get to specific things in your body or in your life. But it was amazing how I said, how are you doing? And you immediately shrunk down into this one bit. So if we consider that pain is a signal, or even because we were around a fire pit the last couple of nights, you have to stoke a flame. You have to feed the flame to keep it going, or it dies out. So while pain obviously is not that simple as just feeding a fire, if you continually focus on it, dwell on it, think about it, organize your life around it, you're essentially building bigger and bigger and stronger connections to help that thought or feeling just reflexively kind of pop up. So there's a saying in neuroscience, and probably it's relatively common, but things that fire together in your body, brain, nervous system, wire together. We used to think that was a one-way street, but now we also know that things that fire apart depart. So we can learn something. We're quite good at learning and adapting. It takes almost, God, I have to remember the exact number. I want to say 3 to 30 times longer to unlearn something. And that's where I think a really big opportunity exists with pain. So I'm going to pause there. What do you think about that? Is this something that's very common with your clients as well? Because it's such a common theme with mine.
Yes, I think it's a very common theme. And to your point on this, I'm having a conversation with someone for the first time, and I asked them, how it's impacting their life. Sometimes they don't even have a real answer for how it's impacting life besides that it's just painful. And they have to really think about oh, that's such a good question. And they have to almost reflect to figure out how it's actually impacting their life. So interesting, and it's the other thing I wanted to mention is interesting how, when, we brought up the 3 right before I hopped on the podcast. And when you brought it up, it's not like it's overly different, but when I was thinking about, okay, focus on the painful signal, it's not just that, that's where their brain goes and that's where they're thinking about things, but it's also how people focus their rehab strategies. If their foot hurts or their hip hurts or their back hurts, then all of their corrective things to try to feel better are only focused on the painful spot. And it's not necessarily on the things that actually are the main root cause, so to speak. You're only trying to treat the symptoms, just kind of adding another layer on that. If your rehab, everything that you're trying to do that you're finding on YouTube, or even if you're seeing a PT or whatever you're doing, if it's only targeting the things that are painful, oh, my back hurts, so therefore I'm going to bend forward and try and stretch it out. And maybe that makes you feel better for a little bit of time, but it never makes things feel better. You're probably going to want to expand upon those things. So just another little tidbit there to throw on top.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because one of the greatest gifts of exercise too is the release of endorphins, which are really big natural pain killers. The caveat is you have to work out relatively hard for a sustained period of time in order to get that effect. So if you're only doing things on your painful body segment and pain prevents you from increasing intensity, well, think about how many things that you're missing out on. Maybe it's a bike ride. Maybe it's walking uphill on the treadmill, not running. Maybe it's swimming. There's so many things that we can do from a sustained activity standpoint. And then maybe it makes your quote unquote targeted exercises better.
Well, Joe, I'm a little disappointed because you just moved into topic number 2 before. Well, I guess that means we were done with topic number 1, right? So mistake number 2 is, sacrificing the activities that you enjoy. So exactly to your point there, I'm not necessarily just to get the endorphins to help you feel better, but, one of the things I see a lot of people do is that they just overly focus on corrective work because they have pain, and they stop the gym. They stop going for bike rides. And I think, maybe what you were thinking, well, I'm not even going to suggest, I'll let you maybe just go when I'm done. But that is such, I think, if you're only doing corrective work and you've stopped doing other things that you love, strength training, things like that, you're missing the boat because sure, you may be afraid to make things worse, but there are always something that you can do currently that will allow you to get some sort of benefit out of the gym, some sort of health response. And when we can start to pull back in activities that you enjoy, it helps outcomes on the other end because now you're not just scared of everything. You're not holding yourself back. You're working on the things that you need to work on, right, from a pain perspective, but you're also getting some of those activities that you enjoy. So that kind of confidence that we're building, getting you back things that you enjoy, all those things as they stack up and give you those wins will help bring down the pain, also help you get back into those activities. And as pain starts to come down, it's much easier to now add on top of those things as opposed to having to start from scratch, so to speak. So I've seen a bunch of people where they've been in pain for a long time and the only thing they do is just corrective work. And sometimes just even pulling them out of that mindset and getting them back into the gym or whatever it is that they want to do goes a long way.
Yeah, I think even where I was thinking of the sacrifice is people treat pain like a god in this instance. Well, my back hurts with this, my knee hurts with that. So I don't do those things anymore, thinking that that will help my knee or my back. So if I give up all these hobbies, the things I love doing, time with my family, you name it, the list can go on and on. And yet we meet them or we talk to them and I ask the question, well, how's giving up this activity going for you? Well, I guess I don't have those sharp spikes in pain, but I'm still in pain. Okay, well, now we're sacrificing immense amount of time spent with doing an activity just because of the small risk or sensation of a sharp pain occasionally. Is that worth the trade-off? So when I think about activities that people give up, and usually they'll bring me back to like moments in time. Oh, I tried playing basketball, I tried running, and, I was out for like a 5-mile run and, my knee, I got a sharp pain in my knee. And I go, okay, how long was this, 5-mile run? How long did it take you? And, depending on your skill level, let's just even say it takes you 45 minutes to an hour, right? Well, in 45 minutes to an hour, for you to trade off that activity that you love for 20 seconds of sharp knee pain, is that do you think that's a worthwhile trade-off? I think it is. I mean, 45 minutes of an activity I enjoy for just maybe 10, 20 seconds of discomfort. Now that's a personal choice. But when you start to realize the investments and the losses of any activity that you're partaking in, we are very predictable as human beings where we get really focused on the highest of high memories and the lowest of lows. Problem is the lowest of lows typically override the highest of highs. So, okay, I'm in Mexico. You're planning your trip to Mexico with your family. Let's say you guys go away for 7 days. Then you come back. On the way back, Olivia got a stomach virus. When I ask you how the trip to Mexico went, you'll be like, that was great. But Olivia got a stomach virus on the last day. So it really ruined it. And it's like, why? Why? Yeah, I'm not saying that you would say this. And obviously, Olivia, I love her so much. Hopefully she doesn't have any norovirus or stomach viruses or anything like that. But, but we hear that too. And I ask that about clients and patients about vacations and stuff like that, or even their workouts. Oh yeah, I got through it, but I had pain with this one exercise and this one set and this one rep. And instead of celebrating that, I think it serves as this impetus to force people to think, this is bad, I shouldn't do this anymore, rather than just weighing kind of like cost benefit.
Yeah. I don't know why I just thought about this, but I think pain makes, can make people a little unrational sometimes and not really like think about it objectively in a sense. And I think that's kind of the purpose of pain, right? To make us change behavior and things like that. So, again, right, going back to the top, right? Like you're not doing anything wrong. I think it's the way that us as humans are wired to make sure that pain doesn't get worse. It's a protective mechanism in nature. But like one other thing I think about when you talk about the story of the runner where it's like 45 minutes to 50 minutes, have 20 seconds of pain afterwards, well, or maybe during, well, it's like, well, when did the pain start kicking on? Like, that's one of the questions I'll always ask. And they're always like, maybe at like mile 3. It's like, okay, well, you can run 3 miles without pain. So why don't we just run 3 miles, right? Like you're not going to have pain. It's going to feel better. You're going to be able to enjoy it. We can work on building more volume, right? So that's just now like a intensity modification in a sense for volume modification. And all of a sudden now you have the ability to do the activity, even though you didn't think that you could before, right? And that's kind of just going back to that point that I was making earlier, where it's, sometimes you just need to, there's always something you can do, right? You just need to find out what that volume, that intensity, what those activities quite look like. So, and I had an idea. I figured this is exactly where you were going to go with it, but I stopped myself. So I want to let you talk and not speak for you in a sense. Other thing on this, well, I think when people give up activities because it's painful, whether it's just like squatting because their knees hurt, or bending, like deadlifting because their back hurts, or, they don't want to get on the floor with their kids because that's problematic. When I always think of it, and I describe it to my patients as like a negative feedback loop. Like, you start to avoid these things because they're painful. Maybe you feel better because you're not doing them in the moment, but really all you're doing is making those positions harder for you to actually get back to, because you're just avoiding them. So when you don't use something, we lose it. They become more sensitive or harder for you to do. You lose mobility, whatever that looks like. And it makes it's almost like making it harder for you to get back to those things. So even though rest is the thing that's going to make you feel better in the short term, it's not a good long-term strategy.
Correct. And, we're living, breathing organisms, and all the tissues we're trying to help are living, breathing, adaptable tissues. So if we continue to decondition or unexpose them to certain movements, activities, well, that's our body's way of saying, hey, we don't need to adapt here. Let's cut costs in this area. Let's go somewhere else. Let's utilize extra energy to stiffening the back, not moving it, to, putting more connective tissue around the foot because we're over-compromising the foot to protect the knee. So great point. I think that is often something that's overlooked or forgotten about with a lot of clients, because the same way exercise will build us up, lead to more adaptation, the lack of doing all those things is going to be more detrimental for us in the long term. So if you have an acute injury, like you said, right, inflammation, first couple of days, protect it, calm shit down, right? Just relax for a little bit. It's going to be okay. And then after those first initial days, let's get to reconditioning, to re-exposure, knowing that there's still going to be alarm bells, right? That's also how we know you're normal. You had an injury. Things are more sensitized, as they should be. And I think, again, that is a normal response that we're not pushing, promoting, celebrating. Like, hey, look at this wonderful thing that your body can do. Remember an injury, help you guide yourself back into it, rather than feeling frustrated and everything by it. And, I love what you said before about, how pain, it kind of makes us change behavior. And something I was reading this week said how pain motivates us without informing us. So it gives us that cue to change behavior, but it doesn't necessarily tell you how or why, how long, all of these different things. And it's up to us to spin the wheels and make up our own decisions, right? So lots of things can help. Hopefully you're not sacrificing things too long. Want to move on to number 3? I think number 3 is a big one too.
I do, but one last point, Joe. I think, I like what you said, you have to calm that shit first. Calm that shit. I think that's perfect for a coffee mug or a t-shirt. So, maybe we need to get those made. Yes, number 3. Number 3 here. I think this is a big one, and I think this is probably the number one mistake that people make, is not following a plan for long enough. So I'll let you kick this one off with your thoughts, and then see where it goes.
Yeah, I was really happy you brought this one up before our call. When maybe not as much now, I get the backstory or the overstory after. A lot of people have been through multiple providers and multiple doctors now. But I remember being in network, particularly, people would come in with their prescriptions from their doctors, and they'd all say the same thing, which always made me raise an eyebrow. Physical therapy 2 to 3 times a week for 6 to 8 weeks. I'm like, wow, why does everything say the same thing? And then I was just thinking like, oh, okay, well, do you have an appointment, like another follow-up set up with your doctor? Some people did, some people didn't. So it never was really based around that. But it just seemed like a lot of people were given this idea that in 6 to 8 weeks, you should feel better. And if you're not better in 6 to 8 weeks, something's wrong. But we just talked about painful signals. We talked about the ups and downs of maybe getting back to activity. We've talked about on the podcast how long things can take. So I think the biggest change in my practice is more realizing different tendons can take months to maybe years. Different injuries can take weeks to months to beyond. And for some people, maybe that pain or that tissue is never exactly the same. And it definitely takes longer than 6 to 8 weeks. I think for probably everyone, even if you did have an acute injury with some inflammation, there's phases. We talked about this briefly just before. Maybe for the first 3 to 7 days, I have a lot more inflammation. The next 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, all right, there's some nice, easy tissue healing happening. And then beyond that, it can take cycles and cycles and cycles that seemingly could potentially go on for years, maybe if not even the rest of our life. If we think about the issue was traumatic enough, like a surgery and things like that. So we're always going through these processes. And I think people just don't give themselves the opportunity to just follow through with the plan. Let time emerge as one of the greatest healing factors that we have, because our bodies can do it. They just need to be guided, given a little bit of consistency with signal, and then step back. We just talked about calm shit down. Well, then that next thing that Greg Lehman always likes to say, build shit back up. And then that's the stuff that takes a really long
That's
time.
the t-shirt. I like that one. Build it up versus calm it down. Or maybe it's calm it down the front and build it on the back or something.
But there's got to be a coffee theme to it, like grind it down and stir it up or froth it up or something like that. Yeah, we'll play on words or something. Maybe we'll talk. Maybe we'll get Greg on the podcast one day and we'll ask him if we could coffeeize it or something.
It's funny. Yeah, it is. Your story. Outside of just like having certain pathologies that take longer to recover. There's two things that you made me think of. One is like, if you had pain for a really long time or like mobility is like significantly restricted. Like I was talking to someone yesterday, they were like, my back is, has been hurting for a really long time. I've had multiple car accidents in the past. And it's like, my mobility is really bad. I really want to work on it. And one of the things that she mentioned that she couldn't do, like she like has like zero extension, like she can't even like lay on her stomach and like prop herself up into any sort of spine extension. It's like that limited. It's like, honestly, like something like this is going to take you a long time to kind of like get some of that back, because you're talking about years and years and years of, things not moving, pain, immobility, and it's not going to take 4 to 6 weeks or 6 to 8 weeks for that to be reversed in a sense. So, and the other thing that made me think of, I saw this research article. I don't remember how long ago I saw it. I can't remember all the details. I just remember it was either 5 years or 10 years after an ACL surgery. It was like telegraph. They did a telegraph, and there was still recovery happening 5 years afterwards, right? And like, we tell people after a year, right, you're going to be like, you're going to feel 100%. You're going to be able to do everything that you can do. But in reality, right, there's still a recovery process happening at, the cellular level. Your body's still recovering from that perspective. So, keeping all those things in mind, like, yes, recovery can take some time. And I think where I really see people going wrong, and it's not necessarily like they're impatient or anything like that, it's they go through a program or they find some exercise to do. They do it for a week or two, and they're like, it only helps in the short term. It doesn't make me feel better in the long term. So now I need to change it. And then they constantly changing their routine over and over again, never allowing actual change to happen. So we could look at change two ways, really, right? Like, I guess one would be, how do we get pain to come down, right? That would be some sort of progress or change happening from a neurological standpoint. But there's also tissue adaptation, which, to kind of where our points were, right, can take months to sometimes years for those physical adaptations to actually happen. So.
Yeah, and I think your analogy there with the ACL is interesting too. And what it made me think of was just how behavior changes so quickly. But the interesting thing about behavior change with injury is that if we stick to the ACL injury around the knee, imagine your body developing this stiff knee walking pattern, which is actually protective and necessary, right, for the ligament to help heal and reduce stressful forces. You learn that over the course of 2, 3, 4 weeks, right? And then you're immediately taught to break it. Well, that might actually take you now 2, 3 months to unlearn that pattern, because it was protective, it was serving a purpose. Now, all of a sudden, some clear delineation of a day or a timeline makes it unadaptable, not overprotective. And now you're trying to break that habit while you're still progressing forward. So that is why I tell people, give yourself space, allow things to happen gradually. if we can modify pain, like you said, even just for a little bit or temporary, perfect. That's your medicine. The same way we would take Advil 2 times a day, every 4 hours, every 6 hours, every 8 hours, that exercise, that activity, that foam roller, that whatever, that helps you break the pattern, that becomes your new schedule, your new routine. Do this every 2 hours, every 4 hours, every 6 hours. Take as needed in order to dull and break that pain, because if we can get it to fire apart, we can possibly get that signal to weaken and eventually depart. So I think that was a great example.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. I tell all my patients the same thing. We're trying to bring down pain. If we find some pain modifiers, you do it very, very frequently. You triple down on it. It's almost like a job for you in a sense. But when you do that window of opportunity, maybe it's like 30 minutes, 2 hours of feeling good. We want to see that expand to 3 hours, to 4 hours, to a day, to 2 days, to multiple days a week, things like that. So well said there. I don't know if I have anything else to add on top of all that. I think, hopefully, I do think that this will be helpful for people. So hope so.
I think so too.
Any last thoughts, Joey boy?
No, just as a recap, don't try not to stoke the fire. Don't simply think that sacrificing activity is going to be the thing that gets you out of pain. And don't forget to stick with that plan, work with your provider, make sure you have a good path in front of you before you give up on any activity or even practitioner.
Right. Love it. Why don't you take us home then?
All right. Well, from Mexico, thank you, Joe. I love you. Listeners, we love you. And don't forget to come back next week for another exciting episode of the Beyond Pain podcast.